Here are the best tips for relocating to Atlanta from another state or even another country. One of the first things that you definitely want to figure out is what part of Metro Atlanta you want to live in. We put out tons of videos every week about the different suburbs of Atlanta, and there are about 100 suburbs around the city of Atlanta. And then of course there is the city of Atlanta, which has multiple neighborhoods. So figuring out what part of the Metro Atlanta area you want to move to really takes some time and understanding of these suburbs and the pros and cons of these suburbs. Besides checking out our videos to understand these different areas, one thing you can do is certainly come into town and visit the cities. These are going to be the best ways to really get a feel for what the city is like and what the people is like and whether or not that's an area that you would want to move to. And if you are coming here in person, one thing that we always suggest is visiting the downtown areas. For example, Marietta is a very large city with lots of neighborhoods, hundreds if not thousands of neighborhoods and different commercial areas here and there. But right in the middle of the city of Marietta, like the historic part, is the downtown area. And this has a lot of densely packed together like stores and shops and restaurants and things like that. And there's a lot of people there, especially like on evenings or weekends. You're going to see lots of people walking around there. And so this is a really good place if you're going to just visit one part of Marietta to get a feel for what that area is like. You would go to downtown Marietta, or Marietta Square as we call it, to really get a good feel for what the people are like and what the area is like. And so almost all of these suburbs have some kind of city center like this, or downtown area. Alpharetta has downtown Alpharetta. Suwanee has the town center park there. And so there's a lot of these kinds of city centers that are really the best place to understand the area. Another big factor that's going to determine what part of the city you move to is obviously going to be why you are moving here. You know, if you're moving here for family and you want to be close to your family, or maybe you don't want to be close to your family, now that the holidays are over and it's like, oh, too much of my family. But if you want to be close to the family, then that's going to be, one of the biggest factors. If your family lives in, Midtown Atlanta, then you might want to be close to there. If your family lives in Fayetteville, then you might want to be close to that area. And so that's going to be a big factor. In addition to that, also, if you're moving here for work, then you're going to want to try to minimize that commute as much as possible. If your work is in Buckhead, then you might want to live maybe on the north side of Metro Atlanta or in the northern part of the city of Atlanta. So areas like Buckhead or Brookhaven or maybe Sandy Springs or Dunwoody, all of these areas are very close to Buckhead. And if your office is there or if you're working there, this would help out your commute not be so long, especially here in Atlanta where the traffic is so bad. You definitely don't want too long of a commute. Another tip for relocating to the Atlanta area is you want to check out these websites like Zillow or Realtor.com to make sure that we have homes here that you like. It may sound obvious, but this is something that we definitely need to do. Like if you're going to move to Atlanta, but you look on Zillow and you're like, oh, there's like no houses there that I like, like if your budget is 700,000 or 800,000 and you're looking for a 6,000 square foot home with 5 acres built in 2021, you might want to confirm that you can find that in the Metro Atlanta area. That would definitely be a big thing. You want to make sure that your criteria for the home that you want to move to is available in the Metro Atlanta area. Of course, I can certainly help with that. If you want to call me or text me, email me, no problem at all. I'm happy to help find some of those homes to make sure that we have the kind of home that you would want to move to. But that's certainly a very big criteria for whether or not you would move to this area. You can find my information there below. I'm the one who answers those phone calls and those text messages, those emails. I'd be happy to help with your moving needs to the Metro Atlanta area. Even if you just have a question about what it's like to live here, feel free, call, text me, email me anytime. When you do call, we can talk about the different areas and help answer any questions that you have about the areas and kind of really nail down, zero in on what area would be best for you. We can also look at some homes together and I can kind of explain like, look, these are the pros and cons of this kind of house or this kind of home. You do want to live in this kind of house or you don't want to live in this kind of house. These are the kinds of things that we can talk about over the phone or on Zoom. We can have a chat together just to make sure that this is the right fit for you. If you're deciding to move here and you're like, yeah, we've figured out the right area and we know what kind of home we're looking for, eventually we can come up with a list of homes that you would like to see. So instead of you having to fly all the way over here or drive all the way over to the Atlanta area, I can go to those homes and we can do virtual tours, whether that's FaceTime or Zoom or however it is that you prefer, so that way you can see the home on like a video call to really get a good feel for whether or not that's the right home for you. One thing that is crucial to making the relocation process simple is understanding the due diligence period that we have here in Georgia. I know in many states in the US, there is a kind of inspection period for a home, and you typically have maybe a week or two to inspect the home and request that the seller make some repairs to the home. And if the seller doesn't make the repairs, then the buyer is allowed to like terminate the contract. It's very different here in Georgia. In Georgia, you have 5 or 6 days maybe to inspect the home, but in Georgia, you can terminate a contract for any reason during the due diligence period. It does not have to be related to the inspection. It can be related to the inspection, but it can also be that you just woke up one day and you're like, you know what? Actually, we don't like that house. Or maybe you decide that the seller is not being very cooperative with the inspection or with any part of the entire contract period. You even don't have to have a reason to be able to back out of a contract during a due diligence period. The reason why this is very important if you're deciding to relocate here is that what we do here at Atlanta Suburban Living is we do the video calls. You see the homes in the pictures, you see the homes on the videos, and then you can make an offer on the home from the area where you live. If your offer is accepted, then you can come into town to make sure and visit the home in person to make sure that that's the right home for you. Instead of having to come all the way over here just to see homes and decide if you want to make offers or not, you can do that during the due diligence period. That way it saves you a ton of time. You're not flying here or driving here for 10 or 20 homes. You're just coming here to the Atlanta area for the homes that have accepted your offer. This cuts out a ton of time. And if you come here and you say, oh, you know what? Actually, now that I'm seeing the home in person, I actually don't like it. You can terminate that contract. There's no penalty at all. It's actually a common thing that people do here in Atlanta. There's no hard feelings. It's there for the buyer to make sure that they like the home. So this is a huge step that we often use here at Atlanta Suburban Living for people who are relocating to the Atlanta area. Another big factor for what kind of home you might be looking for is whether or not you're going to be buying with cash or with a loan. So if you are selling your home in the state or the country where you live and you're using the proceeds from that home to buy a home here in Georgia, you can buy a home cash. Of course, this helps out a bit when you are competing with other buyers, but it doesn't help out as much as many people think. Like if you're selling a home and you have an offer that's cash or an offer that's a conventional loan, the difference is not quite that big. It's a very small difference because a conventional loan that has been pre-approved is an almost sure thing. 95% of the time, it's going to be approved in the long run. So the difference is not very big, but of course it somewhat helps to have a cash offer. But using a loan is almost just as strong as using cash. However, if you are selling your home to buy a home, then you might want to have that contingency in your offer to make sure that your home sells. So this is another tool that we use to protect our clients if they're making that relocation to the Atlanta area. So let me break this down a bit to explain. So let's say you live in another state and you are selling your home and you want to use those funds to buy a home. But if your home doesn't sell, you don't want to be on the hook for the home that you're buying. So with our offer, we would include a contingency that clearly states you're only obligated to buy the home that you are purchasing here in Atlanta if your home sells wherever it is that that home is selling. Doesn't matter what part of the country it's in. So let's say we get all the way to the closing date of the home that you're purchasing and your home still has not sold. You can very easily back out of that contract, no penalty, because we have that contingency. And then of course, if your home has sold, then we just continue with the process and we use those funds to buy the next home here in Atlanta. Another tool that's often used for people who are relocating to the Atlanta area is a temporary occupancy agreement. So this is when you're like buying a home and maybe you need to move in before the home closes. Maybe this is because you have already come into town and maybe the seller needed an extension or you need a place to stay before the home closes. Whatever the reason is, it allows you to move in a few days early before the closing date. I mean, technically you can move in however early you would like as long as the seller agrees. But typically what we see here is maybe 2 to 3 days where the buyer or the seller can live in the home before or after the closing. So what this would look like is, let's say you are scheduled to close at the end of the month on the 30th and it's maybe the 27th and you've already come into town, you need to have a place to live. We can get an agreement between you and the seller that allows you to live in the home during those 3 days until the closing date. This may require you to pay a bit in order to live there, like you're paying rent for a few days, but then at the closing date, the actual transfer of ownership would happen. And so we would transfer the home to your name and you're already living there, you've already moved in. It kind of makes that process a bit seamless. And then when it comes to moving all of your belongings from one state to another state, we have found that there's a few different options. So there is the option where you pay a company to do the whole thing. Of course, this is going to be the most expensive. They're going to come to your home, pack everything up, put it in the truck. They are going to drive their truck to the Atlanta area, and then they're going to unload everything and then drive that truck back. So this is going to be definitely the most expensive option depending on where you live. This could easily be thousands of dollars to make that transition, but it's certainly going to be the most convenient process for making that move. Another option is to get one of those pods where you load up everything into the pod and then somebody drives that pod down here, or you drive the pod down here to the Atlanta area or up here to the Atlanta area. I guess it depends on where you're from, but then they can store that pod either at a storage facility or they can store that pod at the home where you're moving into, and then you can unload everything from the pod. This is kind of a middle ground solution for moving all of your belongings. And then of course another option, and the most cost-effective solution, but the one that requires the most amount of work on your part, would be to rent one of those moving trucks and load everything into the truck, move it down here, unload everything from the truck, and then you can typically return those trucks to, a site here in the Atlanta area. And so this is kind of the three options that we have found to be the most common for moving all of your belongings to the Atlanta area. But there's no question that one of the biggest factors for whether or not you actually relocate or want to even relocate to the Atlanta area is going to be the cost of living here in Metro Atlanta. Like if the cost of living is much higher than where you are currently living, then it might not be such a great idea. Perhaps you're transferring jobs and maybe you're making a bit less in income here in Atlanta, but the cost of living is far less here than where you're coming from. And in that case, you're netting positive. And so for that reason, it would be a good idea to make the relocation. But all of that depends on what the cost of living is here in Atlanta. And so this is a super important one that we need to understand. In fact, I've made an entire video breaking down the actual costs of living here in Atlanta. We talked about groceries, insurance, what a mortgage would look like, taxes even. So all kinds of things that really explain the cost of living. You can check out that video here. I'll see you in the next one.